The night was silent, but danger was everywhere. Deep inside the Roman camp, surrounded by thousands of enemy soldiers, one lone Muslim warrior moved through the darkness like a shadow. If he were discovered, death would come within seconds. And then it happened. Roman guards spotted him. Not one, not two, but 30 armed soldiers rushed forward to capture him. Any ordinary man would have surrendered or tried to escape. But this man was not ordinary. His name was Darar ibn al-Azwar, a warrior whose courage had already become legend. Long before that dangerous night, Darar ibn al-Azwar had already become known among the Muslims as a warrior unlike any other. He was fierce, fearless, and almost reckless in battle. While most soldiers protected themselves with heavy armor, Darar often did the opposite. Many times he would remove his armor entirely, wearing only the simplest clothing as he rode into battle. To the enemy, the sight was terrifying. A man charging forward without fear, without armor, moving faster than anyone expected. Some said it was madness. Others said it was the pure courage of a man whose heart feared nothing but Allah. Darar was not just a brave fighter. He was also one of the trusted companions of the great Muslim commander, Khalid ibn al-Walid. Khalid, known throughout the world as the Sword of Allah, understood the value of men like Darar. Whenever there was a mission too dangerous, too risky, or too bold for ordinary soldiers, Khalid often turned to him. Because if anyone could walk into danger and return alive, it was Darar. The time was the year 634 AD. The lands of Syria had become the stage of a massive confrontation between the rising Muslim forces and the powerful Roman Empire. One of the most intense clashes happened near the city of Ajnadain. On one side stood the Muslim army, smaller in number but driven by faith and determination. On the other side stood the Romans, a massive imperial army with tens of thousands of experienced soldiers, powerful weapons, and the advantage of fighting on their own land. For many Muslim soldiers, this was the first time they had faced such an enormous enemy force. The Roman army was disciplined and well equipped. Their camps stretched across the land like a sea of tents. Guards patrolled the borders constantly. Fires burned through the night, and watchmen stood ready with spears and swords. Any spy who tried to enter that camp would almost certainly be captured or killed. But before the next stage of the battle could begin, Khalid ibn al-Walid needed information. He needed to know the enemy's movements, their numbers, their weaknesses. And there was only one man brave enough to slip into that deadly camp alone. Darar ibn al-Azwar stepped forward, looked at his commander, and calmly offered himself for the mission. His voice carried the quiet confidence of a man who had already faced death many times. He told Khalid not to worry. He promised he would return with the information they needed. Khalid knew the risks. Sending a single man into the heart of the Roman camp was almost the same as sending him to his death. But he also knew Darar. And so, under the cover of darkness, the warrior mounted his horse and rode silently toward the enemy lines. The night was deep. The desert air was cold. Between the two armies, patrols from both sides moved carefully, watching for any sign of intrusion. Slowly, quietly, Darar slipped past them. Step by step, shadow by shadow, he moved closer and closer to the Roman camp. Finally, he reached the outer edge of the enemy's position. In the distance, he could see the glow of hundreds of fires. Roman soldiers were everywhere. Nearby stood a tall hill overlooking the camp. From that height, Darar realized he could observe everything. The layout of the tents, the movement of soldiers, the strength of their defenses. He was the perfect place to gather information. But the moment he began climbing the hill, fate turned against him. Roman guards suddenly spotted movement in the darkness. Shouts echoed through the night, and within moments, 30 Roman soldiers began rushing toward him. For a moment, the situation looked impossible. 30 Roman soldiers were charging toward a single man on the hillside. Their armor clanked as they ran. Torches flickered in the night, casting long shadows across the rocks. They were confident, certain that the intruder would be captured within seconds. Any ordinary scout would have tried to run. But Darar ibn al-Azwar did something very different. Instead of fleeing, he stood his ground. His eyes watched the approaching soldiers carefully. He understood something important in that moment. If all 30 surrounded him at once, the fight would end quickly. But if he could separate them, even slightly, the situation might change. So he turned his horse and began riding down the slope. To the Romans, it looked like the spy was trying to escape. The guards shouted to each other and chased after him, eager to claim the reward that would come from capturing such a bold intruder. Because the Roman commanders had already promised prizes for anyone who could capture a Muslim scout alive. The soldiers ran faster. Darar kept moving just ahead of them, guiding his horse through the uneven ground, weaving through rocks and narrow paths. Sometimes he slowed slightly, just enough to keep them chasing. Sometimes he turned sharply, forcing the group to stretch out across the dark terrain. Slowly, the distance between the soldiers began to grow. The front guards rushed forward, desperate to reach him first. Others struggled to keep up behind them, exactly what Darar had hoped for. When he saw that the pursuers were no longer tightly grouped, he suddenly pulled his horse to a stop. The leading Roman soldier didn't expect it. Before the man could react, Darar turned with lightning speed. His sword flashed through the darkness, and the first guard fell before he could even cry out. The rest of the soldiers froze for a moment, shocked by the sudden attack. They had been chasing a frightened spy. Instead, they had just met a warrior. Another guard lunged forward with his spear. Darar moved quickly, striking again, forcing the man backward. The clash of steel echoed across the hillside as the Romans realized this would not be an easy capture. One by one, they rushed him. But Darar fought like a storm. His movements were fast, precise, relentless. Every strike was driven by the determination of a man who knew there was no safe retreat behind him. Around him stood the massive Roman camp. Thousands of enemies who would gladly see him dead. Yet he did not panic. He fought. Some soldiers fell back in fear, realizing they had underestimated the lone intruder. Others tried to surround him again, shouting orders in confusion. But the darkness, the scattered terrain, and Darar's skill made it impossible for them to control the fight. Minutes passed in a blur of steel and shouting. Finally, Darar saw his chance. Without hesitation, he leapt back onto his horse and rode hard into the darkness, leaving the confused guards behind him. By the time more Roman soldiers arrived, the mysterious warrior had already disappeared into the night. When Darar finally returned to the Muslim camp, he brought with him the information Khalid ibn al-Walid needed about the Roman positions. But more than that, he brought something else. Proof that courage could turn even the most dangerous mission into legend. Stories of Darar ibn al-Azwar would spread across the battlefield after that night. Among the Muslim soldiers, his name became a symbol of fearless devotion. A man who walked alone into the enemy's camp, faced 30 armed guards, and still returned. Not because he was reckless, but because his faith was stronger than fear. And that is why, centuries later, the name of Darar ibn al-Azwar is still remembered among